Hello, hello. Here we are again, coming to you from Broadcast Team Alpha on 44 different platforms around the world. And we're going to have a bunch of fun this time because we have an expert on a lot of different subjects with us. And this will be an educational experience. So if you are watching us on YouTube right now, that's the place to be because you can ask questions and maybe we can come up with some answers for you. We are transmitting on Conscious Awakening Network, and go over there and have a look at those because they got close to 50 different shows over there. And a lot of that stuff is things that we're not supposed to know about. So go to that's the Conscious Awakening Network.org and have a look. And then yeah, I'm Aage, and my co-host, she couldn't make it. She didn't make it back, so we'll just do it by ourselves here today. And for those of you that have watched this show before, you see a different background there because I have a sneaky suspicion somebody has hacked my computer and took all the pictures out of there. So I'm going to see if I can maybe retaliate a little bit because there's a program where I can send viruses up their butt and just give them a little reward for it. I got that link. So we can see what happens. Anyway, yeah, we have Robert Morningstar with us, and everybody knows him. She don't need an introduction. But I want to say a few things anyway, because of the three people out there that's been living under a rock for a while. They may not know. So, so see, he's a tremendous researcher on all of the things that we're not supposed to know about. And he's an intelligent analyst, an investigative journalist, and an expert in Chinese languages and history and the martial arts. And he is a master of Yang. I don't speak Chinese, so I'm going to give it a shot. Yang Family Tai Chi Quan by the Hong Kong Tai Chi Masters Association. From what I understand, there is not that many people that is a member of that association, so this is very prestigious. And he's also studied the paranormal a lot, UFOs, and the extraterrestrial presence. And he is a sought-after guest on radio, TV, conferences, and podcasts like this one, and hundreds of others. So, he has been on Coast to Coast, Far Out Radio, Red Eyes, and many, many other shows. So, welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to speak with you,
Yeah, let's
especially
have.
about these subjects, especially about
Yeah,
the subjects tonight.
there you go. There you go. Yeah, let's have some fun and educate some people because it's not that often that I have somebody that can talk on so many different subjects as you do. So,
Thank you.
the last day or two here, there was an event that everybody, just about everybody, oh, we're going to get burned alive from that sun burst, and no, nothing really happened, did it? But why do you think this happened, and what really happened?
Well, we were expecting something. My friend David Sereda, who's very deeply involved in astronomy and higher level mathematics, he has a unique way of studying cosmic events. And he predicted that something big was going to happen on November 11th. Also, I'm associated with Richard Hoagland. We're part of a network, and we share information. We give critiques to each other. I like to say we are mentors and tormentors to each other. So we were expecting something on the 11th, and then on the 10th, I found out that Jupiter is going to go retrograde. Space.com had an article that said uh, Jupiter is going to halt and reverse direction. It really doesn't reverse direction in its own orbit. It keeps going in the same direction. But because the Earth moves more quickly inside the solar system, it passes Jupiter
Yeah.
periodically, at which point Jupiter appears to stop and starts to go the other way. That's what it means to go retrograde. So, this point at which it halts is a period of intense gravitational pull on the Earth and everything, well, on both sides, really, but on the inner solar system, for example, Mars, Earth, Venus, Mercury, if they're aligned at that moment with Jupiter, Jupiter's gravity is going to have an effect through the core of the Earth and right with the sun. So when I saw that, I said, hey, this might be it. Now,
Hmm.
I've been studying the Jupiter effect, and I've also been studying solar eclipses for decades. And about 3 decades ago, I started to notice that when there were solar eclipses, there were also earthquakes that were tripped. And so I developed this theory that the uh, the conjunction of the moon with the Earth and the sun creates a line of force, a gravitational line that lifts the Earth and the ocean and then releases it, and that this would trigger earthquakes. Now, what I found is that this is true, but the worst earthquake is on the other side of the Earth. This
Mm.
side, the side facing the eclipse that people are watching, that gets lifted up and dropped. The other side of the Earth is dimpled. You know what a dimple is, right? It's when a hollow, a depression.
Mm.
So when that other side of the Earth is tugged upon, all the mass of the Earth between that point and the observation point, like a column, is lifted. So when that drops, we just get dropped to surface. The observation point of the Earth, the people on that side watching the sun, just our continental plate gets lifted and dropped. But the other side feels the lift of the continental plate, the magma, the mantle, the magma, the center of the Earth. So that force is greater on the other side. And so I've been predicting earthquakes when solar eclipses happen, particularly if people are in a fault zone. So I
Hmm.
apply the same theory. I apply the same theory to the possibility of earthquakes being tripped or triggered by Jupiter when it's quote unquote halts. It's that passage where it appears to stop and then go the other way. Similarly to the winter solstice. The sun sinks, and all of a sudden it stops for 3 days, and then it starts to go the other way.
Yeah.
That's similar in theory.
I think a lot of people waited for something similar to the Carrington event in
Yes.
1858, when all
Mhm.
the wire, the copper wires, burned up, and the switchboard on the telex stores, they caught fire. But people felt nothing. They couldn't figure out because they didn't feel anything.
Well, we are inured to electromagnetism and radio waves. People will not feel them, but induction is what we're talking about. A magnetic
Yeah,
field passing through a wire generates an electrical current. So that must have been quite a massive
yeah,
solar flare or coronal mass ejection. So that blast fried the grid of 1854. But my friend made an interesting observation. While I talk, I'm going to turn on the screen share so that we can see
yeah,
the images.
yeah.
Let me see.
Those pictures that you sent, that really is
Right,
something.
they're fabulous. My friend in Oklahoma, Rob Thompson, he and I are very close. We've known each other for 20 years, and we share a lot of science and metaphysics and paranormal stuff. So I've started the screen share. It should take a second or so
Yeah.
to get cranking.
Yeah, because I grew up in northern Norway, and we have in the winter we have the northern lights just about every night, but they are
Yeah.
green, some yellow, and maybe
Hmm.
a little bluish sometimes, but never like this.
Right. The Northern Lights are very interesting. It's a plasma. It's plasma that's being stimulated by the solar wind.
Yeah.
And as long as you brought it up,
Well, that's not
the
working.
HARP experiments, uh, it's
Yeah.
coming. It's being slow. This is being slow. The HARP,
Okay. There we
um,
go. All right, we got one of them.
yeah,
Look at that
yeah,
red color.
yeah. And this is silhouette of houses and trees in Oklahoma. This is right outside my friend's door. He was um, he was driving. He was expecting to see something, but where he went, nothing was happening. But on the way home, he saw on the way home he saw the entire sky turn red like this.
Yeah.
And he spent, he stayed between 10 and
Yeah.
12, yeah, 10 and 12
That
p.m. November 11th. I'll
that
show you
does not
another.
look. It doesn't look like the northern lights, but it is.
No, no, northern lights are curtains of light. They fluctuate, their waves. But what I was saying with HARP, that
Yeah.
HARP projects gigawatts of electricity up into the aurora borealis and pulses it. And so they can make it wave. And there are two kinds of interference. There's destructive
Yeah.
interference and constructive interference. And the way to
Hmm.
imagine it is two people at the ends of a long curtain, and they start to shake the curtain. If they get in sync, they can get all of the waves synchronized so there's a harmonious wave pattern. But if they are antagonistic, let's say,
Yeah. Yeah.
they shake the curtains so that the waves clash at a
Yeah.
certain point in the
Um,
fluctuation.
I
And
have
that's how
never.
they use that as a weapon. They can use the heart as a weapon. The theory is that if we were ever to be attacked with ICBMs, nuclear missiles coming over the North Pole, they could pulse the aurora borealis and direct these waves of electromagnetic plasma, and that would
Yeah.
fry the electronics of the incoming missiles so that the detonators wouldn't work. So they might come
Well,
through
that.
this plot.
Well, it's something good about that for a change, but I've never
Well,
seen
he
it
says,
red.
yeah, he says that he thinks that the reason it didn't fry our grid is that the United States Space Force or Air Force has perfected this. Look at that. Has perfected the Tesla technology and protected our hemisphere
Yeah.
using this concept of electromagnetic field pulses
Hmm.
to deflect the effect, the Carrington effect that would have happened. It did
Yeah.
happen in Africa, right?
Yeah.
We have Africa got blacked out in a lot of areas. So that's my friend's theory, and I think it holds water. I think it's look at this one.
Hmm.
This is
Yeah. There you go.
phenomenal.
That. Yeah, it's phenomenal. That's very unique. I doubt that we'll ever see anything like that again.
It's a wonderful photograph. You can even see stars. We had a
Yeah.
perfect exposure. We had stars
Yeah.
over here, and then an immense. I would almost call it a fireball, except it didn't fry anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at this.
Oh, look at that. That is. Oh.
It reminds me of that old saying: "Red sky at night, a sailor's delight. Red sky at morning, sailors take warning."
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is a beauty. Look at this one.
Okay.
With the light up, the light of coming up from below on the trees. It's
Hmm.
almost a three-dimensional photograph. So
Yeah.
thank you, Rob Thompson in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for thinking of me and sending it.
That's
The whole world
yeah.
can enjoy it.
Yeah, he's quite a ways down too, further into the country, and that's
That's right.
I'm
That's right. So
I'm
this is not, there's not a spillover of the aurora borealis.
uh,
Well,
I
while
can
we're
only
talking about that,
imagine
mhm,
what they saw in Canada.
yeah,
Okay, well, these
sure,
are great pictures, and I got another question for you.
sure.
Then you were teaching, you told me this before we got
Yes.
on the air. You were
Mhm,
teaching a course in remote viewing, and you found
mhm,
yourself outside of your body, and you decided to go to the moon, and
yes,
you had an incredible experience. Could you talk about that?
I would love to. I have taught remote viewing for many years, and I taught at the Edgar Casey Institute, or excuse me, the Edgar Casey Center in New York. I taught two courses, they were a month long, and on the last night, the egress, right, when my students had been practicing for 3 weeks, I said, okay, now we're going to have a target. And on the fourth night, the fourth week, the last session, we would target the moon. So the last time that I did this, I had a very easy time. I did deep breathing for 3 minutes, and in 3 minutes, my my soul, my mind had left my body, and I was on my way to the moon. And I looked, and I was halfway to the moon, and just focused on the moon. And as I progressed, suddenly I felt as if a hand grabbed my shirt or my coat between my shoulder blades and just stopped me, stopped. And I was arrested. And as I looked at the moon, I was turned around to look at the earth. And I looked at the earth and I saw the earth spin 10 or 12 times in about 5 or 7 seconds. And what I saw was that the tectonic plates of the earth were buckling under the gravitational force of the moon. The tectonic plates were buckling like tank treads. You know, the tank is able to move on those treads, those flat steel plates, only because they're hinged and they buckle, right? Well, I was given a lesson from a cosmic force that were it not for the moon, life on Earth could not have evolved or developed because the forces, the tectonic forces, would build up to such great magnitude that we would have super quakes, cataclysmic quakes that would just level mountains, throw the oceans out of their beds, and I'll just go there. So throw the oceans out of their bed, and humanity would not be able to develop. So that was a wonderful lesson. And then after I saw it and registered it, I was turned around and I went to the moon. And I and my students went to the moon. And when we came back, it was about 45 minutes or more that we journeyed. Each person had something very interesting to report. Now,
Oh,
oh yeah, activity. Um, aliens, some civilization, subsurface civilization, doing something like factory work. And one of the people who saw this said they were just robotically going around about their business, like just doing it, not stopping, not thinking, just robotically, noticing they were there, but didn't matter. They just had to do the job and do the packaging, and that's it. Um, Another one over the surface, he saw bridges. He saw bridges on the moon, and he was a graphic artist. Is a graphic artist, and he came back and he did some computer graphics to illustrate it. But the most interesting person was a fellow who came in that night. He didn't take the course at all, and he said to me, "I heard about this. I haven't been around. and I'm really interested. Can I take the course or can I take the class? I said, sure. He said, I'm from Colorado. I don't live in New York. I said, okay. So I, I do guidance, right? I do narrative. I give suggestion. I monitor the breathing. I direct the breathing. Then we get out. When he came back, he told me the most amazing thing. He said that he was confused because when he got to the moon, he could smell wet rocks. And he said, I'm a spelunker. I go in caves. I'm from Colorado and I go in caves and I know the smell of wet rocks. And that's what I smelled on the moon. But I know the moon is dry. And I said to him, no,
No,
it's
it
not.
isn't.
No, it isn't. I published a paper in 2011 that was a monograph from the University of Tennessee. They had been studying moon rocks that had been brought back by Apollo 14 by Edgar Mitchell, who happened to become a friend of mine after I met him in 2004. We corresponded till he died. But he brought back hundreds of pounds of rocks that NASA kept locked up. But finally, they gave them to the university, a bunch to the University of Tennessee. And the University of Tennessee said water was ubiquitous on the moon. Ubiquitous is a beautiful word because it means everywhere. Water is everywhere on the moon. And a couple of years after, India sent a satellite called Chandra that was using radar to map the surface, and it picked up wet spots all over the moon. So there
Yeah.
is sub, sublunar, subluranian water. We call our Earth's surface our terrain. On the moon is called the Luranian. So subluranian water exists on the moon. And this fellow from Colorado smelled it. And I was very happy to hear that. And I surprised him when I told him the two things about the Chandra satellite and the University of
Yeah,
Tennessee.
and I got one the thing to tell you, and that is that on broadcastteamalpha.com in the picture gallery, Nori and I have a NASA print of green vegetation in the bottom of one of the craters.
Mhm.
You've probably seen this one because it's been around a long time. And the reason I know this one is real is because I got it from NASA.
Yeah. Apollo 14 took color photographs, and
Yeah,
they took a color photograph of a green island, absolutely green. Oh, there's a lot of green on Mars too. And my friend Ron
yes,
DeBron uh, discovered. I looked at it and I said Sherwood Forest. And not only Sherwood Forest, but buildings made of blue glass. And as stairways or platforms at levels, terraces of blue glass embedded in green forests on Mars.
yeah,
NASA's been hiding this all that time. I had the privilege of seeing Mars at its closest approach to Earth in 60,000 years. This was August 26th, 27th, 28th. I bought $1,000 telescope. I spent my rent money to buy a telescope because I said, my God, I've been looking at the sky, for 25 years with telescopes,
hmm
and I have to see this. And what I saw in one glance, I saw how big the lie from NASA was. In one glance, I saw the eye of Mars. Slowly, as Mars was turning, I saw a red. First of all, it was a pink halo around it. It has an atmosphere. I could see the air glow around it, extending probably 30, 40 miles above the surface. As it turned slowly, I saw a black spot or area coming around. And when it fully turned around and I looked at it, it looked like a giant eyeball looking back at me with a black tear coming down. Like Alice Cooper has the eye with the black tear. I thought this is our typo. Maybe his subconscious mind gave him that image. But I saw what is called the Eye of Mars. And I'll tell you, Audrey, there are a lot of kinds of fear, you know? And there's one kind of fear that is called dread. It's a different kind of fear. Dread hit me in the stomach. I was looking at this cataclysmic impact of an asteroid that hit Mars so hard it cracked the planet. This impact
Ah,
created the Valles Marineris, 2,500 miles long, cracking the planet. It impacted so hard that it depressed the area, Solus Locus is what it's called, and it left cliffs about 1,000 miles long called the Tarsus Highlands. And coming off the Tarsus Highlands, I saw 1,000 mile long clouds, roll clouds that looked like logs. They were just rolling off a log of clouds, right? One after another, because the winds were spinning off, and that's another big lie of about Mars. You know, NASA tells us that the atmosphere is so thin it's at 100,000 feet. Total BS. I'll tell you two things. First of all, they have dust storms on Mars that cover the planet for weeks. You can't see a
yeah.
damn thing. So if there's no wind and there's no atmosphere, how could a dust storm lift so much dust into the air that it covers the planet? The second thing is this. The night before I saw the Eye of Mars, I saw the Hellas Basin. There was another spot. This is in southern hemisphere,
Mm.
an area called Argyle. And it came around, and it was an oblong lake, oblong, 600 miles long. It was totally white, and I could see undulations of a vapor, of fog, and I saw rainbow lights, colors undulating. I saw the sides of the crater, the Hellas Basin. It's gigantic. I could see the fog sea sinking and rising, and I could see the striations on the side, and it looked like the Grand Canyon. So the next day, so I wrote it up. I saw a sea of CO2 because that's what um, dry ice, when you throw it in water, all that fog comes up. So I wrote up this article for UFO Digest at which time I was a writer and co-editor. 2 days later, NASA came out and said that the Hellas Basin was a permanent sea of CO2, that it was contained by planetary winds that act like a lid on a boiling pot of water. If you put a
Mm.
lid, the water boils up, the vapors collect inside. And so it said that planetary winds were keeping this CO2 locked in the Hellas Basin. So,
Mm.
how can you have planetary winds strong enough to suppress and compress CO2 into a sea, an ocean of CO2? Have winds of 200 miles an hour to lift the dust clouds? As I
It's
said,
going to be hard to do.
in one glance, I saw how big the lie was. And the biggest lie came the day afterwards because they published a photo that they claimed was taken by the Hubble telescope. And it was a cartoon. They had taken away the air glow, they had taken away the atmosphere, they had taken away the clouds, and they had taken away the Aurora Australo-Borealis. I had to
Mm.
name this thing. The Aurora Australo-Borealis on Mars are arcs of plasma that stretch across the whole planet from the North Pole to the South Pole. They arc, like that image behind me, my background, that one streak, the horizon. These arcs of plasma were going back and forth over the planet,
Yeah.
and unforgettable stuff, the eyes of Morningstar. I saw,
Yeah.
and I tell people what I saw. And later on, I guess some of the work I do and the tone.
Maybe this is
It
why
makes them release it. It makes them
yeah,
release it.
I wanted to tell you I have a bumper sticker on the back of one of my cars.
Mhm.
It says NASA lies on it. So maybe
NASA.
maybe this is why, huh?
How about the other joke that what NASA stands for is never a straight answer.
Yeah, I think it was Richard Hoagland that founded that
Right,
one.
right. Never a straight answer.
Uh, I got a question for you also. We talked before the show about Kennedy and his speech on UFOs.
Yes, yes,
Now you got given a copy of the speech, and I
yes.
think you said that you had to promise not to give it to anybody, but you
No, no, no.
didn't.
Now it's open. No, in 1996,
Ah,
in 1996, a man named a professor named Merrick, Stuart Merrick, found it
oh,
in
wait a
archives.
minute. Wait a minute. I see we're down at the bottom of the hour. So for those of you
Okay,
that
all right.
joined
Let
us
me.
late,
Mhm.
so we are talking with Robert Morningstar, and we are talking about some of the secrets that you're not supposed to know about. And we're about to hear about a letter or a speech that John F. Kennedy did on UFOs. This one is getting interesting. So please
Yeah,
continue.
yeah. Okay. Let me preface this by telling you an unusual story. I've been studying UFOs since 1956.
Oh,
I've had many sightings. I have had close encounters and interactions with several types of extraterrestrials, including the praying mantids. And I was secretly involved in UFO research, but it was stigmatized for decades. That was part of the way that the secret government or the national insecurity state suppressed it by ridiculing people. So I was involved, I've been involved in investigating the John F. Kennedy assassination for ages, since the day it happened, to be quite frank. I was in high school when it happened, and I heard the crack come through the speakers. So in 1992, I discovered that the Zapruder film is a consciously engineered optical illusion if one person watches it. If a mass of people watch it, it's a consciously engineered mass hallucination. It is a
wow.
lie. From beginning to end, it is a lie. In 1992, I discovered sets of splices and cuts that were joined in very unusual ways. So I became dedicated because John F. Kennedy was one of my childhood heroes, and his death meant a lot to me. I used to feel like he was my older brother, and I used to, how can I feel that he's my older brother? Well, it's a long story, but they say that blood is thicker than water. It's absolutely true. So my cousin, a U.S. Navy navigator, was very much into UFOs, and he started. We were talking, and he said, "I was telling my friends about you," and I said, Mark, don't mention me at all in UFOs. I'm working on the John F. Kennedy assassination, and I don't want my work ridiculed. I don't want to be discredited because, of course, I'm studying UFOs very seriously all these decades. But if they find out that I believe in UFOs and I study UFOs and I've seen it, they're going to try to discredit my work. So please don't mention. Lo and behold, after so many years of investigation, in 1996, I discovered a CIA document, which was a copy of a letter from President Kennedy to the director of the CIA telling him that he wanted a reclassification of all UFOs. He wanted to know what were our UFOs, what were secret projects that the United States was conducting, the services. Nobody talked to anybody, everything was secret. The Navy had secret projects, the Air Force, the
Yeah.
Army, all had secret projects, and nobody knew who was doing what. So these objects would show up on radar, and we couldn't tell whether they were our UFOs or extraterrestrial UFOs or Russian experiments. And quite a few times we almost went to war with the Russians because one group of UFOs or aliens is trying to drive mankind to self destruction. There
Yeah.
was one group of aliens that was pretending to be ICBMs coming to attack America over the North Pole and saying, the Russians launched a nuclear attack. And NORAD would go crazy, go to DEFCON 1, get ready to launch nuclear missiles at Russia. And these UFOs would be coming over Canada, tripping the DEW line and the Bermuda line, the DEW line delayed early warning system and the ballistic missile early warning system that we had in Canada. They'd pick them up and they'd be coming at thousands of miles an hour. And then they'd go over Canada and just whoop, stop. And then they'd go whoop, straight up into outer space. And they were doing it to us and they were doing it to the Russians. And the code word for these craft, the Air Force had a code word, not UFOs. They call them fast walkers. So that was the lingo. So President Kennedy was aware of this because we had almost gone to war over this with Russia. As a matter of fact, the first crisis involving UFOs that President Kennedy faced was on February February 2nd of 1961, 12 days after he was inaugurated. He received word from NATO that a vast fleet of UFOs or Russian bombers was picked up flying across Eastern Europe, heading toward Western Europe. They flew over France. They flew over Great Britain. They went over the North Sea. They turned north. They then went back east. They flew over Norway, Sweden, Finland, into Russia, and then straight up into outer space. That raised a hair on President Kennedy's neck because they thought the Russians are going to nuke us. So they got all of our missiles. We had Jupiter missiles at that time in Turkey and got ready to launch them at Russia, thinking the Russians were going to bomb France and the Netherlands and Britain. So President Kennedy was keenly aware of this since the 12th day of his administration. So when he met Khrushchev, it was not a good meeting the first time in Vienna. And then they had the Cuban Missile Crisis, which came to the brink of nuclear war. And he said, we can never let this happen again. So he set up the hotline, which was really basically a fax. He set a fax machine in Washington and one in Moscow. So they could fax very quickly. Because during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we almost came to war accidentally because it took 24 hours for a message to get from Cuba to Moscow and the command back. So, knowing that, President Kennedy set up this communication device, so called hotline. And he exchanged personal messages with Khrushchev and said, we have to work together. We have to share UFO information. We have to know what's yours, what's mine, and what's them. So he made a plan to share UFO information with Premier Khrushchev, and he called for a joint venture with the Russians, with the Soviet Union, to go to the moon together. So he sent this memo and this order to NASA, the CIA, Department of the Navy, Department of the Air Force, Department of the Army, National Institute of Science, et cetera, et cetera. They're all listed. And he sent that on November 12th. That was the last nail in his coffin. That was his death certificate. Because 10 days later, he was assassinated. And he was killed on his way to give a speech at the Dallas Trademark. At 1 p.m., November 22nd, he was to give the speech. And he planned to give a pre written speech approved by the State Department, approved by the Department of Defense, but he had a secret speech that he had that he was going to pull out at the end, and he was going to reveal the extraterrestrial presence. He was going to reveal the Roswell crash. He was going to reveal that the United States government had been in contact with this alien group for quite a while, and that it had been kept secret.
Yeah.
So what a surprise. What a surprise. 3 years before, I was telling my cousin, don't mention a word about UFOs. I'm in the Kennedy assassination investigation, and I don't want it ridiculed. And then I find this memo. So I took that memo to Dallas with me, and I gave it to Jim Mars. And everybody knows who Jim Mars is or was. Jim took that memo, he followed it up. He wrote a book called Alien Agenda, and he wrote another book called The Fourth Reich. And The Fourth Reich is about how the paperclip Nazis that we imported amalgamated into the secret government or the national security state and clamped down a little secrecy, an unconstitutional little secrecy on the United States that we're trying to break out of. We're trying to break out and recover the republic. That's what these hearings are. And the person who has made disclosure possible is President Trump. Because
Yeah.
President Trump was asked by the United States Navy in 2015 to run for president so that we could restore constitutional government. And that's what's really going on with this civil war that they want to spring on us, but it's an intelligence war. And it's always been between the United States Navy that has always wanted to tell the American people the truth about it. That's why James Forrestal was killed. He was Assistant Secretary of the Navy during World War II. And again, I was recruited by the US Navy to help them bring disclosure forth in 2008 to 2010 through the United Nations. So maybe I'll talk about that a little later. But the
Yeah.
speech that President
Yeah.
Kennedy
Yes, please.
was found, and I'm going to read it for you. I'm going to deliver this to you on his behalf because President Kennedy gave his life so that the people of the world would hear these words. What follows is a transcript of that speech. My fellow Americans, people of the world, today we set forth on a journey into a new era. One age, the childhood of mankind, is ending, and another age is about to begin. The journey of which I speak is full of unknowable challenges, but I believe that all of our yesterdays, all of the struggles of the past, have uniquely prepared our generation to prevail. Citizens of this earth, we are not alone. God, in his infinite wisdom, has seen fit to populate his universe with other beings, intelligent creatures such as ourselves. How can I state this with such authority? In the year 1947, our military forces recovered from the drying New Mexico desert the remains of an aircraft of unknown origin. Science soon determined that this vehicle came from the far reaches of outer space. Since that time, our government has made contact with the creators of this spacecraft. Although this news may sound fantastic and indeed terrifying, I ask you not to greet it with undue fear or pessimism. Rather, I assure you, as your president, that these beings mean us no harm. Rather, they promise to help our nation overcome the common enemies of all mankind: tyranny, poverty, disease, and war. We have determined that they are not foes, but friends. Together with them, we can create a better world. I cannot tell you that there will not be any stumbling or missteps along the road ahead, but I believe that we have found the true destiny of the people of this great land, to lead the world into a glorious future. In the coming days, weeks, and months, you will learn more about these visitors, why they are here, and why our leaders have kept their presence a secret from you for so long. I ask you to look to the future, not with timidity, but with courage, because we can achieve in our time the ancient vision of peace on earth and prosperity for all mankind. God bless you. John F. Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963.
Yeah, he was planning to go on TV and read that
Yes,
speech.
yes, it was going to be covered by the whole world.
I
That
can
was
see,
that's
yeah,
why they had to stop him. That's what the CIA killed President Kennedy because they considered that and his plan to go to the moon together with the Russians to share UFO information with the Russians. They considered that an act of treason. And in the last 3 years, uh, I have received documents that explicitly state that. President Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy were condemned to death for high treason in a secret court held by the CIA and the Department of Defense, and they enlisted segments of those departments and the mass media to go along with the cover story of a single gunman.
yeah,
I found, or it was brought to me, the man who killed President Kennedy, one of the men who killed President Kennedy, confessed on my radio show on Easter Sunday, 2022. His name is James Files, and he was a born and bred killer, born and bred by the United States government to become a killing machine, a remorseless killing machine. And then they raised him from childhood, and as a matter of fact, they produced him. In 1941, the Office of Naval Intelligence discovered that the Nazis and Hitler had made contact with a reptilian race of extraterrestrials
yeah,
and that they were working with them, genetically engineering the master race. Augie, you grew up in the same time I did, and you must have heard Hitler talking about the master race, but he used a term that always puzzled me. He said that they were going to create a blonde beast. And when I read those words in Rise and Fall of the Third Reich and other hearing speeches, I said to myself, what kind of a madman would say he's going to create a master race and describe it as a blonde beast? Well, I found out through a man named William Mills Tompkins, who wrote a book called Selected by Extraterrestrials, that in 1941, the United States Navy made contact with benevolent extraterrestrials who worked with us on our side against the Nazis and the reptilians. And they found out about this breeding program. So the United States Navy initiated our own uh, breeding program. And they enlisted a young lady down in Alabama who was out of work, and they proposed to her to have a baby or make a baby with a certain Navy captain. But what James Files has confessed to us and to me is that he said, I was produced by a milkshake. He said, the Navy took my father's semen, genetic material, and made a milkshake, and they put it into my mother, and I was a test tube baby. And then
mm,
when he was 8 years old, they took him and they trained him at Montauk to become a professional assassin.
yeah,
And at 18, he went into the army. He was an exceptional soldier because he'd had 10 years of army training. And then he went into the U.S. Army. Then he was
yeah,
sent to Laos, conducting a secret war there, a jungle fighter. He killed more than 18 people in jungle fighting. Then they brought him back and said, God, you're really gifted. we're going to use you, but we're going to take you out of the army and we're going to plant you in the mafia. So they installed him as a killer with the Chicago mafia, and they would call him up when they needed him. Uh, David Atlee Phillips was his controller, and he had a code word. If he whispered that code word on the phone, James File would go, pack his clothes, get on the car, and go to wherever he was called. And
Yeah.
so he was called to Dallas, and his group was one group of Chicago Mafia.
Uh-huh.
Charles Nicoletti, Johnny
Yeah.
Roselli, James
I
File.
see. I see we are coming towards, we got 7 minutes left, but there is
Okay,
one question I got
sure,
to
go ahead.
ask you. You mentioned that the Russians and the Americans were planning to go to the moon together.
Yes,
And I think they did that because there was evidence for that at Apollo 20. But
yes.
what about Operation Red Sun when they may have gone to Mars?
I have seen film
Yeah.
of Mars taken purportedly from a spaceship called Columbia. And
Hmm.
I'll tell you, it looks absolutely authentic to me.
Yeah.
And I believe it may have happened. And that, well, if you read Corso's book, he says that, the Cold War was staged and so that we could pretend to be enemies while secretly working together against this third force. But President Kennedy was not completely right. The aliens that we have made contact with have been basically benevolent, but there's that other group that wants to see mankind destroyed. It's a
Yeah.
very nefarious group, and there are at least in these papers that I have, the MJ12 briefing documents that I've been given, there are listed several times tall gray, short gray, insectoid. And say, can't communicate with those guys at all. So it's just,
Yeah.
they
They
don't
better
care
than
about
us.
human life. They don't
No.
care about human life. And it's
But
disastrous whenever we make contact. But
but
then
there's another thought,
we're,
and that is there was an astronaut that came public and said, I was on that mission to Mars when US and Russia went together.
I remember, was it William Rutledge? I think his name was
Rutledge, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, William Rutledge. Yeah, I heard him and I found it plausible. Okay,
It's
that's what
plausible.
I say. That's my word. It's
Yeah.
very plausible considering what the background that I've shared with you about President Kennedy's plan. Now, another thing that dovetails with this is Nixon's rapprochement with Red China, with Kissinger opening relations with China. I found out that the reason that Nixon did that is that Nixon was very expert in UFOs. He was in charge of the UFO file during the Eisenhower administration. And
Yeah.
he said that we are threatened by a certain group of extraterrestrials. And if they come or when they come, we're going to need the help of the Chinese to defend ourselves. And
Yeah.
that was his primary motivation for opening up relations with China.
Hmm.
Now, I'll tell you this, the Chinese have made contact with an extraterrestrial presence on the moon.
Yeah.
On December 24th of 2013, their lander was approached. The Chang'e lander, Jutu rover, was approached by a UFO, and they took pictures, 10 photographs of a UFO that came down from left side of the screen to the center of the screen to the right side of the screen and off to the right. And this light was so brilliant that it changed the shadows on the rock. The photographs before the UFO appeared, the shadows of the rocks are going from the rock to the right. The
Hmm.
UFO comes by and then disappears, but after it's disappeared, its luminosity is so great that the shadows of the rocks are going from the rock to the left.
Yeah.
The UFO posed for the pictures,
Yeah.
and it
Hey.
did it on Christmas Eve at 6:46 Eastern Standard Time. And when what was he saying? Merry
Yeah,
Christmas. And you know
that's a
the astronauts the astronauts when they did Apollo 8, when they went around the moon, James Lovell said to NASA, NASA, be advised that there really is a Santa Claus. And Santa Claus was the code word for UFOs.
yeah.
So that's a
Oh God,
nutshell.
I see we have about 3 minutes left, but
Okay.
I let me know where people can reach you and listen to your
Okay.
shows. And
All right. Well, I have a website which is the Morningstar Report on Substack. It's simply my name. To get to it, Robert Morningstar, one word, no space, no dot substack.com. robertmorningstar.substack.com. I have a radio show on Sunday and Monday on Revolution Radio. Very simple. Revolution.radio. On Sunday, it's on Studio A at 3 p.m. On Mondays, it's at 10 p.m. At night, Studio B. So A on Sunday, B on Monday, 3 on Sunday, 10 on Monday. And thank you.
okay,
Thank
that's
you.
good.
Really
Yeah,
appreciate
and you know, you talked about going to the moon and you were stopped and you were turned around. For
it.
those
Yes.
people out there that say, yeah, sure he did, I tell you, this is not uncommon. A lot of people are able to do this,
Yes, of
and they
course.
hardly ever talk about it because
Oh, a
it
lot
sounds.
do. A lot do. I recommend to everyone a book called Journeys Out of the Body by Robert A. Monroe. He
Mm-hmm.
developed the hemisync process
Yep.
for developing. The secret is you have to put your left side of your brain to sleep and rest, and your right brain then can journey to the
Yep.
universe.
Mm-hmm.
And the speed is instantaneous. Ingo
Yeah.
Swann wrote a book called Penetration. Ingo Swann, bing, in an instant,
You
went to
think
Jupiter.
yourself there.
And he said Jupiter has a ring. This is 1976. He said, Jupiter has a ring. No, Saturn has a ring. Jupiter doesn't have a ring. Well, guess what? When we sent our
Yeah.
satellites, we got there.
It's
Jupiter
got
has rings
rings.
too. Right.
That's right.
So don't shortchange
All
yourself.
right.
The mind is greater than you know.
Yeah, that's what Albert Einstein said. He said that imagination is more important than knowledge because knowledge is based on science, but imagination, there is no limitation.
Let me leave you with a Tai Chi master saying: to think is to create, imagination becomes reality.
Yeah,
That was Titi Liang, the Tai Chi master, taught me that. That's my
there
motto.
you go.
Okay.
All
Thank you
right,
very
and
much,
then
Aggie.
yeah, let me
That's good.
talk to
Yes.
the listeners out there. If you are on YouTube watching this, that's the place to be. And please subscribe if you are there, because that'll help us a lot. If you like what you heard, 2 clicks, that's all it takes. And click the bell so you can find out when the next videos are coming out. And in the meantime, until next time, be good to each other.